You remember the taste of your coffee that morning. It was rich and dark, real beans smuggled from a reclamation zone in Colombia. A tiny act of defiance in a world scrubbed clean of imperfection. Outside your window, the city gleamed under a sky of flawless, engineered blue. Not a cloud had drifted over this metropolis in 50 years. Weather was a solved equation, like hunger, like descent. The morning was predictable, safe. That was the great lie you were all living. It was a beautiful, comfortable, soul-crushing lie. You took another sip, the bitterness a welcome friend. Then came the shadow. It did not race across the ground like the shadow of a cloud. It fell. A sudden, chilling totality of darkness that swallowed the sun. It was as if the universe itself had blinked. Your coffee mug rattled on its saucer, a frantic dance driven by a vibration that wasn't in the earth. It was in the air, in your teeth. A low, pervasive hum that resonated deep inside your bones, making your organs feel loose. Every silent, gliding maglev vehicle on the sky lanes froze in place. Every light in the towering arcologies blinked once, then died. The silence that followed was a physical weight, a crushing pressure on your ears that made you want to scream just to prove you still could. It was the collective, held breath of 8 billion people. You looked up, your face pressed against the cold plasteel of the window. Every other face in the tower opposite yours was doing the same. A city of statues, all gazing towards the heavens in unified, uncomprehending terror. And then you saw it. The great lie shattered. The pristine blue ceiling of your world broke apart. The sky did not rip or tear. It fractured, like a sheet of obsidian glass struck by an impossible hammer. Cracks of pure starless black spiderwebbed across the familiar blue in an instant. Great polygonal plates of azure light, the shards of your counterfeit daylight, began to peel away. They didn't fall. They simply ceased to be. They dissolved into shimmering motes of golden data, revealing the terrible truth they had hidden for generations. Real space, raw and unfiltered. A void of infinite black, sprinkled with the cold, distant fire of the stars. And in that void, they waited. The fleet, silent, impossibly large. Their arrival was not announced with fire and thunder. It was a quiet, suffocating presence that was somehow worse. They were not ships of graceful curves or aerodynamic design. They were brutalist statements of power, immense hexagons of matte black metal, locked together in a honeycomb of pure threat. Jagged triangular dreadnoughts floated in their midst, their forms seeming to drink the starlight, leaving only emptiness behind. They were built for a single purpose, not to travel the stars, but to own them. The sky was gone, and you understood, with a clarity that felt like ice in your soul, that it was never coming back. The world waited for a voice, for a transmission across the emergency networks, for some kind of demand or declaration that would give this nightmare a shape. The silence stretched, tightening the knot of fear in every human heart. But their first contact was not for our ears. It was for our minds. A presence bloomed in your thoughts, uninvited, unwelcome, and utterly alien. It was not a voice you heard with your ears. It was a concept you understood with your soul. A sliver of ice-cold logic injected directly into your consciousness as if it had always been there. The thought was pure, devoid of emotion or inflection. It was the voice of a mathematical certainty, of an outcome already decided. This world is now designated Territory 734 of the K, Thar Dominion. The name itself was a spike of cognitive dissonance, a word that hurt to think, composed of concepts your brain was not meant to hold. Your biological structure is chaotic and unsanctioned. Its propagation is terminated. The message was not a threat. It was a status update. A notification that your existence was now a clerical error to be corrected. Then came the ultimatum, delivered with the same chilling finality. We grant one rotational cycle for planetary evacuation. 1 day, 24 hours. The time frame was so absurd, so contemptuous, it was almost a joke. A sick, cosmic punchline. How could 8 billion people evacuate a planet? Where would they go? The silent ships hanging in the void were the answer to that. Nowhere. Compliance will be met with non-interference. Non-compliance will be met with systemic erasure. The voice did not need to shout. Its power was in its absolute, unshakable confidence. And then, it was gone. The mental presence retracted, leaving behind a psychic echo. A stain on your thoughts that you could never wash clean. The global reaction was instantaneous. A single, unified scream of panic that rippled across the planet. Order, the fragile construct of civilization, evaporated in the heat of that terror. Governments made impotent speeches. Generals postured before dead cameras. But on the streets, there was only the raw, primal fear of a species that had just been told it was scheduled for demolition. You watched from your window as the first fire started in the city below. The end had begun, and it looked exactly like you always feared it would. But humanity was not entirely unprepared. We are a paranoid species. We build shelters for storms that may never come. And for a threat like this, we had built an ark. Of a sort. Deep beneath the crushing pressures of the Antarctic ice sheet, hidden from the world and from the heavens, was a place known only as Site Prometheus. For over a decade, it had been humanity's most guarded secret, its greatest hope and its most profound terror. It was home to a fallen angel, a scout ship of the K-Thar. It was our one terrible secret. It had crashed 30 years ago, a silent, tumbling wreck that our fledgling orbital defenses had mistaken for a rogue asteroid. It was a ghost, a single, inexplicable anomaly that was quickly hidden and buried under miles of ice and layers of secrecy. An international effort of unprecedented scale began. The world's greatest minds were conscripted, their lives erased, and sent to the bottom of the world. Their task was to dissect the angel, to learn its secrets, to turn its own nature against it. They called the effort Project Chimera. The alien technology was a maddening puzzle, a fusion of physics and something else. Something that bordered on the psychic. Its power source was a micro-singularity, a tamed black hole no bigger than your fist, that warped space around it. We could not hope to replicate it. Our science was infantile by comparison. But we could learn to communicate with it. We wove our own crude, primitive electronics into its systems. We built back doors. We taught the machine to speak a broken, hybrid language of binary and alien glyphs. A pigeon tongue of two vastly different realities. The result was a monster. A true chimera. The sleek, organic hull of the K-Thar Scout, but with a human heart beating uneasily within it. It was not a weapon designed to win a war. It was never meant for combat. It was a skeleton key. A Trojan horse built for one purpose: to get a single human operator inside the enemy's gates, to find a flaw in the armor of a god. The project was a desperate gamble, a final what-if scenario, and as the K-Thar fleet blotted out the sun, the time for what-if was over. The Chimera was no longer a project. It was our only shot. And you were its pilot. It wasn't because you were the best fighter pilot. You weren't. And it wasn't because you were a military hero. You were a surveyor who charted ice fields on Europa. No, You were chosen for a quirk of biology, a fluke in your neural architecture. The Chimera's control system was not a stick and rudder. It was a direct neural interface, a crown of alien metal that plunged the pilot's consciousness directly into the ship's mind. It demanded a very specific kind of brain. Every other candidate had been broken by it. Their human minds, so used to linear thought, shattered against the fractal logic of the Thar machine. They were left as drooling shells, their sanity burned away in a flood of incomprehensible data. But for you, it was different. When they lowered the helmet over your head, the chaotic flood of alien data felt familiar, like a song you'd forgotten you knew. The flowing, impossible geometry of the control glyphs made a strange kind of sense. The generals didn't understand it. They didn't have to. You were the key that fit the lock. You were designated the Ghost Crew, the name for a pilot who was already considered dead. The final briefing took place in a sterile white room deep within Site Prometheus. General M. Kenna, a man who looked like he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, faced you across a steel table. He didn't waste time with pleasantries or false hope. "Your mission is infiltration," he began, his voice a low rumble. "You are to pilot the Chimera into their fleet. You are to remain undetected. You are to find a weakness." He slid a data chip across the table. It contained everything they knew, which was almost nothing. "We need an Achilles heel, son. A command structure. A central power hub. A reason why they're all connected." He looked you in the eye, his own gaze bleak and exhausted. "Your chances of survival are statistically insignificant. We both know that. But the chance of humanity surviving without you is zero." He offered no salute, no handshake, just the cold, hard truth of extinction mathematics. You took the chip. You were just one person, a surveyor. They were asking you to be a savior. It would have been funny if it wasn't so terrifying. You nodded once. What else was there to say? It was time to go haunt the enemy. They strapped you into the pilot's couch. It was not a chair. It was more like a cradle made of a material that shifted and flowed, conforming perfectly to your body. The helmet descended, a whisper of servo motors, and sealed you in utter blackness. For a moment, there was only the sound of your own breathing, loud and ragged in your ears. Then, you reached out with your mind, and the universe opened up. The ship was no longer a machine you were inside. It was you. The Chimera answered your thought. It became an extension of your body. You felt the chill of the hangar on its hull. You felt the thrum of the singularity in its heart. You felt every system, every sensor, as if it were your own skin, your own eyes. There was no ignition sequence, no countdown, no thundering roar of engines. You simply thought of your destination, up. And the world fell away. The ship did not launch. It ceased to be in one place and began to be in another. It passed through 2 miles of solid Antarctic ice without a sound, without a tremor. The ice was not so much penetrated as it was politely asked to step aside. One moment you were deep underground. The next you were under the cold, starry sky of the true night. There was no sense of acceleration, no crushing G-force, just a seamless transition from stillness to impossible speed. Earth shrank below you, a dying blue jewel in a sea of black. The cockpit around you began to glow. Smooth, featureless walls came alive with flowing rivers of light. Amber, silver, and blue glyphs swirled in complex patterns, conveying data in a language of pure form. The air was thin, recycled, with a bizarre, inorganic scent of ozone and something vaguely like cinnamon. It was clean, but it felt wrong, empty of the familiar smells of life. This ship was not made for lungs. It was not made for flesh and blood. You were a foreign microbe inside a sterile environment, a ghost in the machine. Looking back, you saw your world, the blue and white marble of classrooms and history books. But it was tainted. Angry red blossoms of light bloomed on the night side like a plague, cities being erased by silent orbital lances of energy. The K-Thar were not even waiting for their own deadline to expire. They were pruning the garden. A cold, hard fury crystallized in your gut. This was no longer a mission of survival. It was a mission of retribution. You turned your new body, your stolen ship, toward the dark fleet, and without a second thought, you plunged into the abyss. Entering the K-Thar Armada was like a single drop of rain joining a hurricane. The scale was demoralizing. Your ship, a marvel of alien engineering, felt like a child's toy next to these behemoths. They were not ships. They were mobile landscapes. Black, silent monuments to power that drifted with an unnatural grace. Their hulls were vast, empty plains of a material that did not reflect light. It consumed it. Flying past them was like flying past localized black holes, patches of nothing where stars should be. Your survival depended on a lie. The Chimera constantly broadcast a complex, encrypted signal, a digital signature that identified you as K-Thar. To their sensors, you were just another scout returning to the fleet. A friend, a cog in their great, silent machine. So far, the lie was holding. The colossal ships ignored you. Their immense weapon arrays, large enough to crack continents, remained dormant. But with every passing kilometer, the sweat on your brow grew colder. You knew that a single, deep scan from a suspicious cruiser would unravel your disguise, and your existence would be measured in microseconds. The fleet was not a chaotic swarm. It was a masterpiece of orbital mechanics, a living, breathing city of death. Smaller, angular warships, the destroyers, formed a protective outer shell. They moved in precise, interlocking patterns, a net of razors guarding the perimeter. Deeper inside, the city-sized cruisers held their positions, great islands of military might. And at the very center, holding court over them all, was the flagship. A ship so large it made the others look like pilot fish. It defied description. It was not merely a ship. It was a statement. A perfect six-sided polygon of blackness, so vast it had its own subtle gravitational pull. You could feel its mass tugging at the Chimera, a gentle but insistent summons. It was a moon, a constructed moon of war and command, the source of all order in this terrifying fleet. You kept your distance, moving with a faint purpose. You mimicked the flight paths of other scouts. You tried to look like you belonged in the lion's den, anything to buy more time. You were a spy at the funeral of your own world, searching for a single clue that could stop it all. It was the human equipment that found it. The crude, almost laughable sensors your team had bolted onto the Chimera's advanced sensor suite. The K-Thar systems were too sophisticated, too refined. They were filtering it out as background radiation, as meaningless noise. But your primitive gear, too dumb to know any better, picked up a whisper, a ghost in the static, a faint, structured signal hiding beneath the overwhelming energy signature of the fleet. A single, pure note in an orchestra of chaos. It wasn't a language. It was more fundamental than that. It was a rhythm. A slow, steady pulse that vibrated at the lowest frequencies. Lub-dub, lub-dub. It felt ancient, and tired, like the heartbeat of a dying leviathan. And woven into that pulse was an emotion, a raw, pure broadcast of feeling that needed no translation. It was pain, a chorus of agony so profound, so immense, it seemed to soak into the very fabric of space-time. It was a scream that had been ringing in an empty room for millennia. Your mission parameters were clear: observe, record, and retreat. General M. Kenna had been adamant. Do not engage. Do not take risks. You were an intelligence asset, not a weapon. But this signal, this was an anomaly, an imperfection. The K-Thar presented a front of flawless, cold logic. But this signal was pure, raw emotion. Pain is a weakness. Despair is a vulnerability. And this was the loudest scream of despair you had ever encountered. It was a loose thread on their perfect black uniform. You had to pull it. You diverted power to your auxiliary systems. You began the slow, painstaking process of triangulation. It was like trying to hear one person's whisper in the middle of a rock concert. The fleet's energy output was deafening, but the signal was constant, a mournful metronome in the chaos. Slowly, a location began to resolve on your makeshift display. The signal's origin was unambiguous. It was coming from the very heart of the Armada, from the colossal hexagonal flagship, the command vessel, the heart of the beast. In that moment, your orders became irrelevant. The mission had a new objective. You were no longer just observing. You were following the pain. The decision was not made with logic. It was an instinct, a gut feeling that the answer to everything lay at the source of that mournful pulse. Your orders were to retreat, to bring back the priceless data you had already gathered. But that data only confirmed what you already knew: that you were outmatched, outnumbered, outclassed in every conceivable way. That was a recipe for a noble defeat. This signal, this was a chance for a miracle. You pushed the thought, the command, into the Chimera's consciousness. Take us in, to the source. The small scout ship altered its course. It stopped mimicking the patrol paths, made a direct line for the hexagonal flagship. The journey was agonizingly slow. Every second you expected alarms to blare, expected to be vaporized by a defensive turret. But nothing happened. The flagship was a sleeping giant. It did not seem to notice or care about your approach. You were too insignificant, a gnat flying towards a mountain. Perhaps arrogance was another one of their weaknesses. You hoped so. It was a very human failing. You searched the vast, black expanse of the hull for an entry point. There were no obvious hangar bays, no blinking lights indicating a landing zone. The K-Thar did not seem to build things for convenience. You expanded your sensor sweep, looking for energy fluctuations, for weak points, and you found one. A small, almost invisible seam in the hull. A maintenance airlock barely large enough for your ship. It was cycling energy in a low-power state. An unlocked back door. It was too good to be true. A trap, probably. But it was the only invitation you were going to get. You guided the Chimera towards the seam. The ship's systems interfaced with the flagship's hull. Alien code spoke to alien code. A digital handshake that requested permission to dock. For a terrifying moment, there was no response. The silence stretched, and you imagined 1,000 guns turning your way. Then, the seam glowed with a soft, blue light. The hull itself seemed to melt away, peeling back like metallic petals to reveal a docking tube. The Chimera slid forward, locking into place with a soft, final thud. The outer door sealed behind you. You were inside. The air in the cockpit suddenly felt very thin. You unstrapped yourself from the couch, your legs unsteady. You grabbed your small pack of human gear and walked to the ship's airlock. The inner door hissed open, revealing a new world. You stepped out of the Chimera and onto the deck of the Thar flagship. The first thing that hit you was the scale. You were standing in a corridor, but it felt more like a canyon carved from polished black stone. The ceiling was so high, it was lost in shadow. The walls were impossibly far apart. A single human standing here was an absurdity, an error in proportion. You felt like an insect in a cathedral built for giants. Every echo of your own breath seemed to mock your smallness. The second thing you noticed was the silence. It was absolute, unnatural. There was no hum of life support, no distant thrum of engines, no clatter of footsteps or chatter of crew. The ship was a tomb, a massive, silent mausoleum drifting through the void. Where were they? Where were the Thar, the conquerors who had shattered your sky? The ship felt abandoned, a ghost ship commanding a fleet of ghosts. This was not the bustling heart of a military operation. It was something else entirely. The gravity was wrong. It felt lighter, about 80% of Earth standard. Each step you took had a slight, disconcerting float to it. The air was thin and cold and carried the same strange, sterile scent of ozone and cinnamon you'd noticed in the Chimera. It was breathable, but only just. Your suit's display warned you of low oxygen and strange trace elements. Prolonged exposure was not recommended. As if you planned on staying for a vacation, you oriented yourself, your boots making no sound on the strange, seamless floor. Then you focused, reaching out with your senses. The signal, the pain. It was stronger here. No longer a faint whisper, it was a palpable presence in the air. A low, sorrowful hum that vibrated in your chest, a bass note of pure despair. It was coming from deeper within the ship, a breadcrumb trail of pure agony. You had no map, no guide, but you had a direction. You chose a path down the colossal, empty corridor, and you began to walk towards the sound of a breaking heart. The walk was unnerving. You passed through halls that seemed to defy geometry. Archways opened into vast, empty chambers that could hold entire cities. Light came from no discernible source, a soft, ambient glow that seemed to emanate from the very material of the ship. And everywhere there was that oppressive silence, a silence that screamed of absence. You saw no control panels, no computer terminals, no barracks, no mess halls, none of the things a warship should have. This was not a vessel of conquest. It was a monument to something. But to what? The signal grew stronger with every step. The low hum of pain became a clear, resonant thrum, a lament that you could feel on your skin. It led you to a single, immense door at the end of a long causeway. The door was a perfect circle of iridescent metal, 100 meters high. It was sealed shut. There was no handle, no keypad. As you approached, it seemed to sense your presence. The metal shimmered and the great circle dilated like the iris of an eye, opening a path for you. You hesitated for only a second, your hand on your sidearm. Then you stepped through. The room was not a bridge. It was not a command center bristling with tactical displays. It was a nursery. The vast, circular chamber was filled with thousands upon thousands of glowing pods. They were arranged in concentric rings, stretching out as far as the eye could see in the soft gloom. Each pod, made of a translucent, crystalline material, pulsed with a soft, internal light. And inside each one, floating in a shimmering amniotic fluid, was a Thar infant. they were not the monsters you had imagined. They were small, delicate, and strangely beautiful. Their bodies were long and slender, with multiple, graceful limbs. Their heads were smooth, with large, dark eyes that were closed in a state of suspended animation. And standing watch over the pods were the Cathar, the adults. They were tall and willowy, clad in simple, flowing robes. They moved with a slow, deliberate grace, tending to the pods. They paid you no mind. They were not warriors. They were caretakers, gardeners in a field of sleeping children. Your mind struggled to reconcile the image of these gentle beings with the brutal conquest of your world. You stood frozen at the edge of the chamber, an intruder in this sacred space. The Thar caretakers continued their silent work, their movements serene and practiced. They did not seem to perceive you as a threat. They barely seemed to perceive you at all. Their entire focus was on the sleeping young. And then you looked up, past the endless rings of pods, towards the center of the chamber. And you finally understood the source of the signal, the source of the power, the source of the pain. Hanging in the very heart of the nursery, suspended in a crackling cage of pure energy, was a star, or something like a star. It was a being of pure light and energy, a star-born entity, a creature of breathtaking power and beauty. Its form was constantly shifting, a swirling vortex of plasma and nascent solar flares. It was contained, trapped. The cage of energy that held it was visibly straining. Arcs of golden lightning lashed out, striking the containment field with silent, furious blows. It was a god in chains. This was their power source, not a tamed singularity like in your scout ship. This was a living creature, a captured deity, its divine agony being siphoned off to power this entire moon-sized vessel and the fleet it commanded. The signal you had followed, the mournful heartbeat of pain. It was the silent, telepathic scream of this entity, a being of immense power, trapped and used as a battery. The sheer cruelty of it, the cold, calculated pragmatism, was more monstrous than any weapon. The Cathar caretakers moved around the chamber, seemingly oblivious to the torment at its center. Or perhaps they were so used to it that it had just become background noise. The price of survival. The nursery was bathed in the golden, sorrowful light of the captive being. The gentle glow that nurtured their young was fueled by the torture of a god. The entire Thar civilization, their entire exodus, was built upon this single, foundational act of cosmic cruelty. You looked from the caged entity to the sleeping infants, and a terrible, sickening understanding began to dawn. One of the caretakers finally noticed you. It turned its head slowly, its large, dark eyes fixing on you from across the chamber. There was no malice in its gaze, no anger, only a deep, ancient weariness that seemed to transcend time itself. It did not speak with its mouth. Like the ultimatum, the communication was a thought, placed gently into your mind. It was not a cold command this time. It was filled with a profound, aching sadness. You see our truth, intruder, our great shame, and our only hope. The Thar being began to walk towards you, its movements slow and deliberate. It did not project hostility. As it drew closer, more thoughts flowed from its mind, painting a picture of cosmic desperation. Our galaxy is dying, not in billions of years, but now its heart has grown cold. The stars are fading, one by one. We are the last survivors of a great dimming. The images that flooded your mind were of dead worlds, orbiting cold, dark stars, a universe bleeding out its light. It was a horror beyond your comprehension. We could not stop it. We could only run. The caretaker gestured with a long, slender arm towards the captive entity. Its thoughts were tinged with a regret, so deep it felt like a physical weight. We found this one adrift in the great void between galaxies. A being of immense creation, a source of endless energy. For it, giving light is as natural as breathing. But it would not come with us. It did not wish to be a part of our journey. So we took it. We caged it. We built our new world around its stolen fire. The K, Thar confessed its sin without flinching. Its pain powers our ships. Its light nurtures our young. We created a symbiosis of the parasite and the host. You looked at the thousands of sleeping children, the next generation of a dying race. They were fleeing an apocalypse of unimaginable scale. They were not conquerors, driven by malice or greed. They were refugees, desperate parents trying to save their children from the dark. And they had made a terrible choice. Your world, Earth, was not a target of conquest. It was a lifeboat, a new warm star to huddle around. They were not here to kill you. They were here to replace you, because their survival depended on it.